We are at Laguna Seca at Gridlife once again, and this time I'm here with Marcus Fry and his awesome 510. This car's been out on the track. This is the second time at Laguna. The car itself is incredible. It's a showstopper. Every time people see this car drive by, pretty much stop what they're doing, just take a look at it. It's extremely unique. There's so many things I'd like to talk about this car, and I want to give Marcus the opportunity to kind of share more about the build and the background and all this stuff. Marcus, what I really wanted to ask you is, like, how did you end up using a 510 as your time attack vehicle?
So I've always kind of liked these cars ever since I saw one in high school, and I'm up for making it hard for myself to have a competitive vehicle. I bought one a long time ago. It's not this car, this is number 2, but the first one kind of got me used to the fact that nobody makes parts for these, and from then on I've decided to engineer every aspect of the car to make it do what I want it to do, which, you know, has its pros and cons. You end up making parts multiple times or break parts a lot in order to get what you want, and it's finally made it to a point where it's really fast.
Now, I wanted to add that you actually started off doing drifting before time attack. Is that correct?
Correct. This car was originally supposed to be purpose-built for Formula Drift. I had recently won my Formula D license, and I was like, I want to have the oldest car in Formula Drift. Yeah, that was a great idea. 2 years into building the car, they changed the rules and made it impossible for the car to be legal. So from that point, it was just a play drift car for a couple years, and then I got tired of buying tires and wanted more seat time, and what's next? Well, that's road racing.
How long have you been developing the 510 since it was a drift car and doing time attack with it?
So far, the full grip development to what it is now has been about the last 3 years. I got into fast or high-paced autocross with the Optima's Ultimate Street Car Series, and that I achieved the goal I was trying to do with that series, which was to make it to the Invitational at SEMA. After that, I was like, okay, it's time to do something else. While I was doing Optima, I experimented with a round of Gridlife, which was last year at this event, which was awesome. And so this year I decided, all right, it's going to be a full-time attack car now, and we will build the car as needed to meet those demands.
So the car itself is incredible. Why don't we go over some of the main features that you've built into this car? Like, for example, these look like we've got 8 velocity stacks coming out of this engine. Can you tell me more about the main bits and pieces that really make this car special?
I mean, obviously, we've got our intake sticking out of the hood. I've always liked an 8-stack or an ITB setup. So this intake manifold was one of the first most expensive car parts I bought for this car. And that's just the topper. It's the first thing you see when you see the car. You see the intake sticking out of the hood. And another reason to go with this is this intake is maximum airflow for any engine. There's a direct path. I don't run air filters. People give me a hard time. I don't care.
And about how much horsepower are you making now?
This motor is a fully built LS2 that's about 400 cubic inches. It makes right over 700 crank horsepower.
A little bit of background. I've known of Marcus in the Bay Area for some time. We originally started talking. We have some mutual friends, and he wanted a really bespoke suspension setup for this car to take it to the next level, if you will, right? So for us, this was our first major engineering exercise where we 3D scanned the car. When we were learning how to work with those tools, we modeled it in SolidWorks, and we figured out the motion ratios and the spring rates that were required. It was a really interesting project for us, and it was also very validating because when we first modeled the car and came up with even the spring rate suggestions we came up with actually ended up being kind of okay for real life, right?
Like the spring rates that he picked after doing all the scanning have been perfect. I haven't had to change them. There was one point where I was like, I think I need stiffer fronts, and I bought stiffer fronts. We put them on.
It was something else.
Didn't feel like it. I put the softer ones back on. Haven't had to change since. And because of Grant, this car now handles amazing. It's predictable, it's stable in turns, I'm not gonna die. And we're just gonna keep going from here. Hopefully next year it'll have something else on it. We try to experiment on this car because the suspension's a one-off more or less. The rear is specifically a one-off, whereas the front mimics an S13 240.
Now, the most attention-grabbing thing about this entire car is definitely going to be the aero. Can you tell us a little bit more about just the aero package itself, and maybe even how that interacts with suspension tuning and setting up a car for road racing?
It's definitely something you have to think about when you're setting up suspension. The rates on this, I'm sure you picked something a little stiffer than necessary because we were compensating for how much downforce potentially it would have. So the front end is version 2, the rear is also version 2, but the rear we did first, and then I instantly found out that the front needed to be better. So this front end, the way you see it now, is new for this event, and I tried to apply things I learned off of the previous splitter. So the previous splitter had solid mounting points, didn't really flex that much, and it led to component failures. I'd hit the ground and it would snap hard points, like these struts. So these are now flexible. They'll allow for the splitter to bend up and take an impact, but it's still strong enough for me to stand on it.
And where did you buy all this?
Oh, that's the best part. The rods are Delrin. It's a type of plastic. It's usually made for bushings, but I got this from a website called Big Master Car. The splitter itself is a piece of cabinet grade plywood I got from a friend that owns a cabinet shop. And all the, what they call dive planes or canards and end plates are just 1/8 inch aluminum. The piece of material on the front is 040 aluminum, really thin material. And then I use quarter turn or Zeus fasteners to hold it all onto the car.
Yeah, what's really incredible to me is almost none of this stuff is store-bought. Mark has completely built this car from scratch, including all the aero, the framework, everything on this car. He just completely built with his own bare hands. I think it's really incredible. Could you estimate like how much downforce you think you're actually making at this point at speed? Do you have any ideas for how much actual force to the wheels you might be seeing on track?
I want to say the front end is between 300 to 500 pounds of downforce at 100 miles an hour. That is a guess, but it's based on how much suspension compression we're achieving. So that right now the tire is about 1.25 inches away from the fender, and at speed it's fully compressed. And you know what the rates are. I can't remember what they are in K. But
if I remember correctly, there's something around like 16 or 18K, something around that range.
K in the back, and in the front it's like 9K. So it's compressing that about 1 inch length, or 25 millimeters. So that gives you an idea of how much downforce the front aero is putting on the car. Luckily, because of now the front of the car, the way it's designed, it balances out the rear, so the car doesn't push anymore going into corners. But I found out this event that if the car doesn't have a full tank in the back, it's really loose at slow speeds. Oh, wow. So every time I've gone out, I make sure I have a full tank, and at slow speeds, it stays hooked up.
So one thing I'm sure people and myself are very interested about is you've got some very interesting covers over your wheels. Can you talk more about these?
So the idea with the turbofans is not only have I always wanted to put turbofans on a car, these are also handmade.
And you built that yourself?
Yeah. They took upwards of 70 hours to make the pair. There's about 130 rivets per turbofan. I made 2 practice turbofans before this to test sizes and shapes and etc. But they're supposed to do 2 things. They're supposed to help with brake cooling, and they're supposed to help pull air out of the engine bay or the high pressure air in the front of the car. So that way the car is faster through the air. You get the pressure out where you don't want it. Because if the air can't go out the wheels or exit the sides of the fenders, it's going to go under the car and produce lift.
Is this a different approach than doing like brake ducts? Like, why would you pick turbo fins over a brake ducting system?
Oh, I didn't. It has both.
One thing I want to just mention is this car is incredibly fast. Could you share with us like what your fastest lap time is at Laguna? I know it might not be today, but what kind of times are you seeing with this vehicle out here?
This event is the first time on this specific tire. It is not the latest generation of slick, but it's a tire. And during this event, I was able to achieve a minute 33.3 as my fastest lap time. Last year, my previous best was a minute 30.989. And I so far haven't been able to get there again.
Yeah. Clearly, you're going to be in the sub 30 seconds very soon, and I can't wait to see that happen.
Yeah, if I get below 30, it'll be like, oh my God, I'm alive.
Well, there you have it, guys. This is an incredible build. We've been delighted to be a part of his journey. And also, I just want to say, like, Marcus is an incredible individual, and like we've had a great time getting to know Marcus. And just want to say thank you so much for working with us, and a true joy for us to work with you on this. So thank you so much.
Right on, man. No, it's great.